Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Brandon, and welcome back to Marotta Media. You know what I'm going to say, it's been a while, but believe me, I have my reasons for being away as long as I have. I've been very busy. And that is something that I will be discussing in this video, because I did the exact same thing last year when I made a video about this, and I thought it was so much fun, and I thought, you know what, let's do it again. And that being a video going over this year's Phoenix Film Festival. This is the second year in a row that I have attended this festival. I volunteered at it again this year, which I did last year, and once again, I had an absolute blast at this festival. I watched so many great movies, met so many incredible people, made connections, and made memories that will stick with me forever. But I'm going to focus mostly on the movies in this video, obviously, because that's what I do here. I watched 27 total movies at this year's festival, 15 feature-length films and 12 short films. But I will only be going over 20 of them in this video because 7 of the short films I watched, I legitimately cannot find any info anywhere online. At least at the time I'm recording this video. That could change in the future. But since I have so many movies to go over, I am going to try to go through them as fast as I possibly can because I don't want this video to be too long. So I will give brief reviews of almost everything I watched because just about every movie I watched at this festival is one that I would recommend you go check out. So I guess without further ado, let's get started. Let's review almost every movie that I watched at the 25th Annual Phoenix Film Festival. The opening night film of this year's festival was the comedy film The Ballad of Wallace Island. In this movie, we follow a trio of characters, reclusive lottery winner Charles and musicians Herb and Nell. And Charles is a big fan of the duo's former musical act, McGuire and Mortimer, so he hires the two of them to come to his private estate and perform a private show for him. But tensions start to flare when Nell arrives with her new husband because she and Herb used to be a couple. Since I'm going to do a rapid-fire review of all of these movies, I will say that this movie is an absolute delight and one of my favorite movies of the year so far. This movie is absolutely hilarious. It got me to laugh out loud several times. It's very charming and heartwarming. It really doesn't do anything to try to impress you all that much. It just wants to tell a touching story, and it succeeds at exactly that. And it's also a commentary about fame in the entertainment industry, but it has a more positive spin on it. This movie talks about how it's important to do what you want in life, and even though you might have succeeded in what you wanted to do, in this case specifically music, it's important to make music or art that makes you happy. And this movie discusses how music is such a beautiful thing, and it has the ability to bring people together. My only complaints about this movie is that the pacing is a little bit quick in parts, and the conflict is pretty predictable in the end. And there are some plot points, specifically one involving Nell and her financial situation, that's only mentioned once and never brought up again, and I wanted to know more about it. But despite all that, The Ballad of Wallace Island is a delightful film. I loved it. It's currently in theaters right now, so go give it a watch. I'd give The Ballad of Wallace Island an 8 out of 10. The next movie I watched was a very small independent film called Some Kind of Justice. As I said, I was a volunteer at this festival, and my job at the festival that I signed up for was to be a liaison. And a liaison is basically like a helper for some of the filmmakers that have movies that are being showcased at the festival. And my first weekend working the festival, I was the liaison for this movie's director, writer, actor, editor, producer, basically everything, Brian Gervais. And I will say, before I get into my thoughts on this movie, very nice man. I had a really good time getting to know him throughout the first weekend of the festival, and I'm probably going to send him this video, so hello Brian if you're watching this. And I will say, even though I was this man's liaison, Brian told me to be honest with my thoughts on his movie, so I'm going to do exactly that. Long story short though, this is a good movie. I did enjoy it, but There are things about it that didn't quite work for me. But Some Kind of Justice is about a man whose son is killed through an act of senseless violence. And when he feels that law enforcement isn't doing enough, he decides to take matters into his own hands. Now, one thing that Brian mentioned to me, and several times throughout during the Q&As about this movie, is that he made this movie for no money. He says that the only expenses that he shelled out was for catering to feed the cast and crew. And I will say, if this movie's budget was $0, then it is very impressive. The movie is all told through black and white, which really works for a story like this. The acting by the entire cast, I will say, is pretty great. And the story actually gets a lot darker, and there's a twist towards the end that I was not expecting at all. My only problems with this movie is that some of the framing in this movie is a little bit off. There were times where I noticed that characters' heads were cut off and you couldn't see all of them. Or there were times where the camera was at this strange Dutch angle. But those are really my only complaints about this movie, because I was really impressed with it, especially for a movie with no budget. So Brian, if you are watching, congrats to you on this film and all of its success that it's been getting at these other festivals you told me about. I could tell you put a lot of hard work into this. There's a lot of passion behind it, I can really tell. Now, I might get some hate for this because I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10. I feel like that might be too low to some people, but that's just what I landed on, but it is a good movie. If it is streaming anywhere, maybe Brian can answer that, then go check it out. The third movie I watched at the festival was one of my most anticipated, if not my most anticipated movie that I watched at the festival, and that was The Surfer. Anything with Nicolas Cage, I am immediately on board. And in this movie, we follow Nicolas Cage, who plays the titular surfer, who returns to his hometown in Australia. And he's trying to purchase his childhood home on the beaches that he learned to surf on, but when he gets back home, he realizes that the beach has now been overtaken by a gang of younger men. So we follow Nicolas Cage on this journey as he tries to win back the beaches that he grew up on. Now, I will say, this movie, for me personally, was everything that I was hoping it would be. It doesn't go off the wall insane that some people were probably hoping it would, like other Nicolas Cage movies. But you do see Nicolas Cage start to slowly lose his mind and descend into madness, and that is always a treat to watch. The movie is very psychedelic, but it doesn't ever become too confusing to the point where I couldn't tell what was happening. The movie is also very funny, and I feel like a lot of people will get frustrated watching this movie because of the sheer amount of gaslighting within it. Seriously, these boys that take over this beach just treat Nicolas Cage like a piece of shit. They treat him so terribly, it's almost too cruel. You just want to jump through the screen and give Nick Cage a big hug and tell him that everything is going to be okay. But I'm really not sure what else I could say about this movie other than the fact that I had an absolute blast with it, and if you're a fan of Nicolas Cage, I think that you will absolutely enjoy this movie too. This movie still does not have a wide release. It gets a wide release on May 2nd, depending on whenever I put this video out. But if it is out before the movie gets a wide release, go check it out when it gets a wide release on May 2nd. Overall, I'd give The Surfer an 8 out of 10. And the fourth movie I watched was Platoon. Yes, that Platoon, the war movie about the Vietnam War from 1986. This is the first time that I ever watched Platoon, and I'm so happy that this was my first experience watching it, and you will see why. But with this movie, honestly, I was just gonna more so go over the experience, but I will give my brief thoughts on the movie. Long story short, I thought that this was a brilliant war movie that has aged like a fine wine, showcasing the sheer pointlessness of wars, specifically the Vietnam War, and how all of these men suffered and even lost their lives for a war that, in hindsight, was very pointless. Such a star-studded cast too, which I never realized. I always knew who was in this movie, like Charlie Sheen, Willem Dafoe, but I didn't realize that it also had big names like Keith David, Tony Todd, Johnny Depp, Kevin Dillon, Forrest Whitaker. But my overall experience watching this movie was pretty magnificent because Oliver Stone, the director, as well as a good chunk of the cast and crew were actually in attendance at the screening. And there was this awesome Q&A afterwards, even though Oliver Stone was having a little bit of trouble with his microphone. But it was still fascinating to see and to be able to watch a classic movie that won Best Picture for the first time on a gigantic screen with a great sound system with the cast and crew present, it's an experience I will truly never forget. There's one other story that I need to mention when I watched this movie. After the screening, my friend and I made our way down to the front of the theater to try to get pictures with people, and my friend really wanted a picture with Keith David. He did get it, thankfully, but Keith David, you could tell he wasn't really keen on taking pictures with people at that time. But after we got the picture, we both left the theater, and I started to go to the bathroom because I really had to go. And I noticed Keith David was coming out of the theater on the other side, and he was also coming into the bathroom right behind me. And as we're both entering, I hear this guy scream, "Hey, can I get a picture with you?" And Keith David goes, "Not in the bathroom." Then once we get into the bathroom, I see that all of the urinals are taken, so me and him are standing in line, and I just turn around to kind of, politely greet him. He looks at me and he throws his arms up and says, "In the bathroom?" And I just laugh and say, "Yeah, that's strange. I bet you get that a lot, don't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do, and it's really weird." And he just starts laughing. So that was a funny interaction. I didn't get a picture with Keith David, but I can say that I had a funny conversation with him in a bathroom, I guess. All in all, though, Platoon is a great movie, and I'm so happy that this was my first experience watching this movie. Overall, I'd give Platoon a 9 out of 10. The next movie I watched was the documentary Dinner with Leatherface. And this documentary is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's all about Gunnar Hansen, the man who portrayed Leatherface in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. And I'm really surprised how much I liked this documentary. I just found this whole doc to be very touching and sweet because Gunnar Hansen was just an amazing person. He just came off like a very nice, humble, and genuine human being. You could tell that he was forever grateful for the opportunity he had and the opportunities that he had afterwards. And unfortunately, Gunnar Hansen is no longer with us. He lost his life in 2015 after a battle with cancer. Hearing all of these people talk about Gunnar Hansen in the way they do is nothing short of beautiful. You could tell that this man really touched these people's lives and had such a positive impact on everything that they do. And you get to see how he inspired them and how he changed their lives for the better. And I think I could speak on behalf of all of humanity when I say that this is how I want people to talk about me after I die. This documentary isn't perfect, though, because some of the filmmaking aspects were a little bit amateurish, specifically when it came to the interviews, because there were times where the framing of the camera during the interviews was strange. There would be a mirror placed in the background, and you can see the subject and the equipment in the mirror. And the quality of the interviews also varied. There were some interviews that looked like they were shot on a very nice camera, and other times they looked like they were shot with a toaster. And there's also a weird use of these very low quality PNG images throughout, and I'm like, you couldn't have found a picture with better quality than that? All in all, I thought this documentary was great. I really enjoyed it, and I actually came to find out that when I got my ticket for it, it's actually streaming on Tubi. So if this sounds interesting to you, then go check it out. It's streaming on Tubi right now. Overall, I'd give Dinner with Leatherface an 8 out of 10. And that same night, I watched another documentary that involved the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that was the documentary Chain Reactions. And in this documentary, 5 subjects are interviewed where they discuss their feelings, theories, and impact of the classic slasher movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And these subjects include the likes of Patton Oswalt, Stephen King, as well as Jennifer's Body director, Karen Kusama. And I thought this documentary was fascinating because it was really interesting to hear what each of them had to say. They all had such unique viewpoints when it came to their feelings about this movie. But it does drag a little bit, and it does start to overstay its welcome. I think that this could have been a lot shorter. I don't really have much more to say about it, honestly. It's just a very simple documentary, so give a simple review, I guess. I don't know if this is streaming anywhere, but if you are a fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think you'll like this documentary because I found it fascinating to hear others' theories on the movie. Overall, I'd give Chain Reactions a 7 out of 10. Then I watched one of the festival's centerpiece films, and that was the upcoming romance movie On Swift Horses. This is a movie based off of a book of the same name. And in this movie, we follow 5 characters that navigate risk, romance, self-discovery, all within the 1950s. And a lot of their stories begin to parallel and intertwine with one another. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not care for this movie at all. Which is really a shame, because I was looking forward to this movie because it has a star-studded cast. With the likes of Will Poulter, Jacob Elordi, Diego Calva, Sasha Calle, and Daisy Edgar Jones. But the problem with this movie is that the script is just an absolute mess. The story is told through absolute breakneck pacing, which results in very rushed and underdeveloped relationships. Seriously, some of these characters will just meet, and then maybe a few minutes later, they're romantically involved. And I just did not buy it because not enough time was spent with them and getting to know them before they got together. It's also not edited very well. There's absolutely no flow to any of the scenes or the transitions, because there are certain scenes where characters will just show up to a place and then not even a minute later they're leaving, or it'll cut to another character entirely when we were just getting to the meat of another scene involving a different character. And there were times where my audience started laughing during this movie, and it is funny in parts, but the parts my audience was laughing at were absolutely not meant to be funny. The cast does a pretty good job with what they're given, but other than that, this movie isn't really anything special. It's not bad or anything. I didn't absolutely hate this movie, and I don't feel like my time was wasted. It's just mediocre, if anything. Overall, I'd give On Swift Horses a 5 out of 10. Then I watched another documentary, and that was the documentary Going Postal: The Legacy Foretold. This is a documentary that I was really intrigued by because this is all about the video game Postal, which came out in 1997. A game that was so violent and controversial, it got the attention of the United States Congress. And in this documentary, it just showcases the inception of the game, how the idea was first thought of, as well as the creation of the game's developer running with scissors. And I loved this documentary. I thought it was great. And I actually interviewed the directors for this movie, Tad Salih and Jason Sikorsky, recently. Be on the lookout for that. I will be posting that interview shortly after this video, probably. But I complimented them on doing a great job with this documentary because I was truly shocked at some of the things they were able to pull off. The B-roll footage they got looks great, and there's archive footage of newscasts throughout the country talking about Postal that were kept. And on top of that, the amount of interviews in this movie is just insane. Some of the people they were able to interview, like Zach Ward, you might not know that name offhand, but he played Scut Farkas in A Christmas Story, as well as Uwe Boll, who might not also be a household name, but he is regarded as one of the, if not the worst director of all time. I found this documentary to be immensely entertaining, and I think that's easy for me to say because personally, I was not familiar with what Postal even was. Which is kind of amazing because I consider myself a gamer, so I'm not sure why I had never heard of this game before. My only complaint with this documentary is that it does run a little bit too long. I feel like it could have ended a lot sooner. But talking to the directors in the interview I did, I know they had a ridiculous amount of footage and they wanted to use as much of it as possible, which I get, but I feel like this could have been 10 to 20 minutes shorter. But other than that, I thought this documentary was great, so if you guys want to check this out, there is actually a Blu-ray you can purchase for pre-order on the movie's website. And according to Tad and Jason, this movie will be available on one of the streaming services sometime this spring, hopefully. But Tad, Jason, if you guys are watching, pleasure interviewing you. I had a lot of fun, and congrats on this movie because I thought it was great. Overall, I'd give Going Postal an 8 out of 10. Oh, and following that up, I watched another documentary. I'm sensing a theme here. And that was the documentary Colleyville. Much like Going Postal, this documentary is all about something that I was not previously aware of. That being an incident in the small town of Colleyville, Texas, where a very mentally disturbed man entered a synagogue and took everyone inside hostage. Now, this is the second movie I was a liaison for at the festival. This was for the second weekend. And I was the liaison for one of the subjects of the documentary, Jeff Cohen and his wife Karen. Very nice people. And I have their contact info too, so I will be sending this to them. So if you guys are watching, hi Jeff, hi Karen, hope you guys are doing well. But Colleyville was also a very good documentary. Again, a documentary shedding light on a subject that I had no previous knowledge of, which is very strange to me. This documentary mostly consists of CCTV footage inside the synagogue, which I thought was a really good way of telling this story. There's also some very nice hand-drawn animations that are used all throughout, and I thought that was a nice touch. And one of the biggest surprises about this documentary is how often I laughed in it. Not that this entire situation was funny or anything, but there were just certain things that happened during this entire situation that are so absurd that you can't do anything but laugh. And Jeff even said that in the screenings for this movie. He encouraged the audience to laugh. He's like, it's okay, you have permission, because there are things in here that are objectively hilarious. And they absolutely were, so I wasn't expecting to laugh at a documentary with a subject this serious, so I liked that. Overall, great documentary. Again, with this movie, not exactly sure what a release looks like, but hopefully this gets a streaming release of some kind soon. Overall, I would give Colleyville a 7 out of 10. Then I watched the coming-of-age film An Autumn Summer. This is probably the most memorable movie I watched, just in terms of my experience and all the people I met, because I was lucky enough to meet the director of this movie, Jared Isaac, as well as his girlfriend Lauren, and Jared actually took home the award for Best Director at the festival, so congrats to him. And he's another person I'll send this video to, so Jared, Lauren, if you guys are watching, hope you're doing well, congrats to both of you, and I hope you're having a blast on your festival circuit for this movie. But An Autumn Summer is a very simple story where we follow a group of kids spending what could be their last summer together before they head off to college. And this movie actually has a pretty big cast. The two stars include Mark McKenna, who's also not a household name, but you might recognize him from Sing Street, as well as Lukita Maxwell, who was most recently in that terrible Blumhouse movie, Afraid, from last year. But if you're not a person who subjects themselves to terrible movies like me, you might also recognize her from the television show Shrinking, which I haven't watched, but I hear is fantastic. And this movie was great. This is one of those movies that falls into the hangout movie sort of category. There isn't really a central story. It more so just gets by on the vibes and the atmosphere. And I think Jared did a great job doing that because he perfectly captured this time of his life beautifully. Obviously, I cannot attest to his experiences, but I can tell that he is being very genuine and this film is very personal to him. It's shot beautifully, the acting is great, and there's a lot of inspiration I caught glimpses of, particularly when it came to movies like Dazed and Confused and even La La Land. But I think this is a great movie that will resonate with a lot of people, just about growing up and wanting to stay young forever. I really enjoyed this, and I really hope to see it get a wide release in some capacity soon. Overall, I'd give An Autumn Summer an 8 out of 10. The next movie I watched was the independent slasher film Black Theta. Not really sure how to describe the plot of this movie, but we follow a man who survived an attack from a cult that tried to kill him, and it jumps ahead to the next year where he's recovering, and more people start to become involved when the Black Theta family, as they are called, returns. This is a very small, independent film, and honestly, this was probably the most fun film I watched at the festival. Probably because of the atmosphere. I watched this movie at like 9 p.m. on a Friday in a packed theater, and Jared and Lauren from An Autumn Summer were actually sitting next to me, so that was really fun. But people were screaming, people were laughing, because this movie is hilarious. The humor really worked for me, and the director Tim Connolly even said that he was worried that the humor wouldn't resonate with people because the humor felt too personal to him. But it really worked for me. I thought that this was hysterical. It does have some pretty impressive effects too in terms of the kills and the blood, but I don't really have a whole lot to say about this movie either. I just found it to be a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and if I had the chance to watch this with a crowd again, I would absolutely do it. Overall, I'd give Black Theta a 7 out of 10. Now I will be getting into the animated films. I will only be going over 5 of the 12 because, as I said, 7 of them I cannot find any info on anywhere. But the first animated short I watched was called the 1971 Kitchen Grand Prix. And this was a very charming little short where we follow a bunch of racers in a kitchen, and they're literally just food items. And the point of the race that they are competing in is to see who will get eternal life in the refrigerator. And one of the racers ends up dead in a freak accident, but everyone becomes a suspect. And this was probably my favorite short of all of the shorts that I watched because I loved the creativity of this. It's shot in this sort of documentary sort of style, and all of it is stop motion, which really reminded me of something like Robot Chicken. And the humor is very funny, even though the humor basically just boils down to food puns. So if you get a documentary crew and make something like Robot Chicken mixed with Mario Kart, then you would get the 1971 Kitchen Grand Prix. I thought this was great. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. After that was the animated short Van Tongerloo's Dream. And this short had a very simple story. We just follow this hippopotamus that is taking a nap at the zoo, and we get an inside look into what he's dreaming about. Very unique presentation with this. It's animated almost like a magazine cutout. Like someone cut out a bunch of sections of a magazine and just animated them. It looks really cool. And you could tell that this was very much inspired by someone like Dr. Seuss because all of the dialogue and story is told through this poetry-like style where every other word rhymes. Not perfect, but I had a good time with this, and honestly, I think kids would enjoy this. Overall, I'd give Van Tongerloo's Dream a 6 out of 10. After that was the animated short Drag Fox, where we follow a young boy who is going through an identity crisis when this mysterious fox enters his home and shows him who he really is. This was also told through stop motion, very well done. And this movie is not subtle with its messaging at all. It is very clearly a commentary on identity and trans youth. But there is a musical number in this short that I really enjoyed because, as you guys know, I'm just a sucker for musicals. And as I was listening to the fox talk in his speaking voice, I was sitting there thinking, I know that voice. That sounds a lot like Ian McKellen. And I was like, wow, whoever did that Ian McKellen voice did a really good job. And then the credits came up, and sure enough, that was Ian McKellen. And I'm really surprised that a short film like this was able to get a huge star like that. Another really good short, didn't love it, but I really respect what it was trying to say, and I did enjoy it. I'd give Drag Fox a 7 out of 10. Following that up was the animated short But I'm a Shoe. This short utilizes live action and animation where we follow a woman that is going to go on a flight, but before she gets on, she goes through this transformation period where she becomes a shoe. And the director for this short was actually in my screening, and she said the inspiration for this came from not wanting to deal with all the side effects of traveling. So she thought, what if I could just turn myself into an inanimate object throughout the entire plane ride, and I wouldn't have to feel anything once I got off. And I really enjoyed this one too. I thought the animation style was great. It's all hand-drawn, and it kind of reminded me of something you'd see on Nick Jr., or at least the Nick Jr. that I grew up with. I don't know about you guys, depending on how old you are. I'd give But I'm a Shoe a 7 out of 10. And the last animated short film I will be going over was Pow. In this short film, we follow a young Native American boy who attends an intertribal powwow with his family. But this boy is a lot more interested in video games than his own culture, and when his video game system starts to die, he scrambles for a way to get it charged before it does die. This is another movie where I actually met the director, Joey Clift, very nice guy, and he actually reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in reviewing this short film. And I love a good short film, so I was happy to oblige, and I'm happy that he did because I liked this short film a lot. This also utilizes different animation styles, especially this very cool 8-bit looking one that you see at the beginning. It's also very funny, specifically when it came to one character that's like a fry bread salesman who's just having a terrible day and he can't catch a break. But as I was watching, I wasn't exactly sure what this movie was going for, but then it actually spells it out for you at the end, which I appreciated. It's just about how you can have other interests in life, but it is also important to stay true to who you are and appreciate where you come from, and how the two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. And I just think that message is so beautiful, and I could tell that Joey really put his heart and soul into this, and this meant a lot to him. I really enjoyed it. I would give it an 8 out of 10. The next feature-length film that I watched at the festival was the upcoming animated short film Sneaks. And Sneaks is an animated film, as I said, where we follow a pair of talking sneakers voiced by Anthony Mackie and Chloe Bailey. And these sneakers are very special, and they are won by a student named Edson, but then they are stolen away by a man named the Collector, who is a notorious shoe collector, and unbeknownst to him, when he steals away these sneakers, they become separated, and the two main sneakers try to find their way back to each other. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This movie is terrible and easily the worst movie that I watched at the film festival. When I first heard about this movie not too long ago, I thought, an animated movie about talking shoes? Who asked for this? But ironically, this is actually the second movie I watched at the festival involving a talking shoe, but at least the other one was good. The problem with Sneaks is that the animation is just awful. It almost looks like it isn't complete. It seriously looks like it was animated by the same team that animated Food Fight. The character movements are also so stiff and robotic, the frame rate slows down in parts, and there's even times where I notice character models that were clearly reused. And some of the character models are even really frightening to look at. And the more I thought about this movie, the more I realized that the story is literally just a rehash of Toy Story 2. If you need a refresher, in Toy Story 2, Woody gets kidnapped by a collector named Al to be paired with the other toys from Woody's popular TV show, Woody's Roundup. And he's gonna send them all to Japan, where they can basically just be displays for the rest of their lives. And that's pretty much what happens here, because one of the shoes, specifically the one voiced by Anthony Mackie, is like, I just want to be displayed. I don't want to be worn, because then I'll be scuffed. But his sister shoe, voiced by Chloe Bailey, is like, no, we're shoes. We're meant to be worn. And that's basically the entire lesson that they learn. The only good things I could say about this movie is that it has a surprisingly star-studded cast, and the voice acting isn't terrible, and the soundtrack is actually pretty great from what I remember. But other than that, this was just a really bad and often frightening experience. This is not a good movie. It is out in theaters right now, but I don't recommend you watch it unless you're just trying to entertain your kid for a few hours, I guess. Overall, I'd give Sneaks a 3 out of 10. After that, I watched the documentary The Cigarette Surfboard. And this documentary is exactly what it sounds like. A man built a fully functioning surfboard that was made from 10,000 encased cigarette butts that were found on the beach. And there were more of them that were made, and some of the surfboards were actually at the theater, and I took a picture with them. And this documentary I found to be decent. It has a really good message behind it about protecting the environment, especially the ocean. And it just goes over how all of these people were influenced by surfing and how they're determined to spend the rest of their lives cleaning up the ocean and protecting it. And I really like the overall message behind it. I'm sure everyone would, but the problem with this documentary is that there's only so much you can do with a topic like this. Because I would say a good 40% of this documentary is just B-roll footage of people surfing. And it's fun to watch people surf, but it loses its appeal after a while. And this documentary was only 90 minutes long, but honestly, the longer it went on, the less I really cared. Not to say that I don't care about the message behind it, but I don't know, I was just losing interest. And that really is a shame, because I could tell that a lot of heart went into this, but I feel like that this only needed to be an hour, and that would have been good enough. This isn't a bad documentary. It has a great message behind it, as I said, but I don't know. It just felt like this could have been better. Overall, I'd give The Cigarette Surfboard a 6 out of 10. Then I watched what was easily the best movie, not my favorite, but the best movie of the festival, and that was Beyond the Gaze, Julie Campbell's swimsuit issue. This documentary showcases the life of Julie Campbell, the woman who was basically the pioneer behind the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue and turned it into the behemoth that it became. And this documentary goes over everything that she accomplished in her life, her personal life, as well as all of the people whose lives she changed for the better. And this was a pretty fascinating story about an unsung hero, because I had no idea who Julie Campbell was, and after watching this, I have such a newfound respect for her and everything she did. She was an amazing human being, and she actually just passed away a few years ago, so rest in peace to her. But I found this to be such a beautiful documentary telling a story that I feel like a lot of people weren't aware needed to be told, but I'm happy that it was. The interviews that they get in this one too are just amazing. They get some of the biggest models in the world, like Tyra Banks, Elle Macpherson, Kathy Ireland. All of these people who you may know but don't realize who was responsible for jumpstarting their careers. And I love documentaries like that tell the story of someone who accomplished something so amazing, but their story never gets told. And I'm happy that this one was told, because this deserves to get a lot more attention. I hope this gets a wide release, especially theatrically, because it deserves it. Overall, I'd give Beyond the Gaze a 9 out of 10. And we have reached the end. The final film that I watched at the Phoenix Film Festival was the closing night film, and that was The Wedding Banquet. In this movie, we follow a gay couple, Chris and Min, as well as lesbian couple, Lee and Angela. And both of these couples are facing their own dilemma. Min is at risk of being deported back home to South Korea, but his partner, Chris, is kind of gung-ho on getting married. And Angela and Lee are trying to conceive a baby together, but they're having trouble. So Min, coming from a very rich family, proposes the idea that he and Angela get married. So that way he could stay in the United States by getting a green card, and he will personally pay for Lee's IVF so she can get pregnant. This is a movie that I heard about for a while. I had seen the trailers for a bit, but I did not really go into this movie with any kind of expectations. But to my surprise, I loved this movie, and honestly, it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I think that the character work in this movie is outstanding. Literally every single character that you see on this poster all have depth. All of them are likable in their own way, and they're all given just enough to do. It's pretty amazing that they were able to fit all of this into like an hour and 40-minute movie. It is very funny, but it's also very sad and kind of tragic in parts, and it does a great job of balancing both of them. And the story actually goes in ways that I did not expect. This is also a remake of an Ang Lee movie of the same name, and I wanted to watch that movie first, but I never got around to it, but I definitely want to watch it now, considering how much I liked this. My only complaints with The Wedding Banquet is that the actual wedding itself was very short. I feel like this scene could have gone on a lot longer, and it could have led to some really funny moments. And it all leads to a really predictable ending, and Lily Gladstone is one of the stars of this movie, and she is fresh off of an Oscar nomination for Killers of the Flower Moon a little over a year ago. But she felt very underutilized in this movie. I mean, she does a good job with what she's given, but I wanted to see more of her. I know I said every character is given the perfect amount to do, but I feel like Lily Gladstone could have been given just a little bit more. But other than that, I really enjoyed this movie. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was great, very funny, and it's one of my favorites of 2025 at the moment. And it's currently in theaters, so go watch it. Overall, I give The Wedding Banquet an 8 out of 10. Well, that is it, guys. That is everything, well, almost everything that I watched at this year's Phoenix Film Festival. I had an absolute blast at this festival once again. I'm still so sad that it's over, and it's been a few weeks already. I truly cannot wait to go back next year and I can make more videos like this going forward. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys like this video, then be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. And also guys, for the first time ever, I am going to plug my other socials. I will have them all down there, but you could follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I review every movie I watch on TikTok because it's so fast and it's easy to do. I do the same thing on Instagram, even though I don't like that app, but I review all new releases on there. But on Instagram, I like to do more writing, so you could find written reviews there. You could follow me on Twitter. I'm not calling it X. I review movies there, but on there, I kind of just speak whatever is on my mind. And I do rant about sports a lot because I'm a big sports fan. And if you want to keep up with everything that I have been watching, then you can follow me on Letterboxd because I log everything that I watch. But if any of these movies sound interesting to you guys, then let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you want to watch, or if you did watch any of these, let me know your thoughts on them. But if you guys want to see my video from last year going over the Phoenix Film Festival, I will link that as well as another video right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day. I will see you all next time.